I finally made a bow build that actually worked pretty well. Of course, bow builds have always been a thing, though they usually have very of success. I, however, have come up with one that I think stand the test of time and or at least for this current meta. Like as long as this meta goes on, I think this build will work pretty well. In the past, I've tried different ones and they've just never really worked. Bow is more of a support weapon than a main bar weapon, but hybridization and all this other stuff, I got it. I'm excited. I'm an archer in real life, and so I like to try make work in video games. Also, Bosmer are my second favorite elf. I mean, just look at her. She's got antlers. It's adorable. So, Bosmer are also usually archers, which means I have a thematic reason and a personal interest in making archery work in a video game, and I've done it. We're gonna go off we're gonna go over what I use and what you could use, and an alternate build that maybe sweaty tryhards will be more familiar with and they will want to use, but each build has its own advantages and disadvantages that even the tryhards will have to consider. This is a little bit off meta just by virtue of the fact that it's a bow build, and right now the only meta bow build is Bowsork, which I tried. I liked it. I struggled with using Dark Deal, so I went back to playing Nightblade. So let's first go over the stats and what I'm using in terms of one of the reasons this build is nice is because a lot of builds out there are suggesting use a Rallying Cry Ice Staff, and that shit's expensive. And though I do have a bow build in which Rallying Cry Ice Staff is used, for this one that I am using more frequently, you use a Rallying Cry bow, which is pretty expensive, or pretty inexpensive. I want to have this be powered, not sharpened. I just have it sharpened because I'm lazy and I haven't got enough transmutes to actually change it yet. We want this to be powered. My front bar I do have sharpened, and I have decided to use Order's Wrath in my front bar. I tried a couple other options, and I decided that Order's Wrath is probably the best way to go for two reasons. One, because when you're using a bow, you have extra passive crit. And with the recent update to bow, which makes this build even more powerful than it was last patch, you get even more crit in certain situations. We'll go over that in a second. But because we have all this crit, Nightblade has an extra crit modifier, and we can use the Shadow. I'm like, fuck it. Order's Wrath, that's my damage set. It works. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. That's for a Mythic, Arcane Ring of Majesty. It's just good. You get extra damage, you get extra damage mitigation. It's just free stats. There's no reason to not use it. You could use Sea Serpent's Coil. I don't like Sea Serpent's Coil. If you like it, go for it. Knock yourself out. But that's not what I prefer, and the snare will get you killed. This is not really a good build for brawling, at least in melee. You can brawl as long as you kite properly, but if you're brawling in melee, you're gonna die. So that even like a second of that snare being on you is gonna get you killed. I will go over the enchantments and why I use them in a second. Monster set. You can choose different monster sets. I decided on Balrog. Mostly because having 500 ultimate Balrog and then Toxic Barrage is just a lot of fucking damage. That's really hard for people to manage and avoid. Let's buff up for a second just so you can see my stats, because I know some people love seeing stats. I am currently for weapon power potions, so my stats will reflect that. There is a way to make this build work with tripods, and I will show that in a bit, but this is what I'm using right now, so this is what I'm going to show you. Our weapon damage is not that high, because bow does not give you that much weapon damage. However, our crit is almost 50%. When we're in combat, when we actually hit someone, because of the hemorrhaging passive, not the part that increases crit damage by 10%, but the part where dealing critical damage grants you and your group minor, which is kind of like 5% extra crit. So I'm pretty sure, I can't remember if it's like 52 or if it's 51%, but when I'm in combat, my effective crit is 51 or 52%. So using the Shadow and Order's Wrath is an absolute excellent option. You'll notice that my stamina and magic recovery are similar, so you know that's something to consider. Even with the potion, they're kind of not too far apart. We'll go into that in a second. Our penetration is around 10k. I would not go into PvP with less than 8k pen. Most people have a fair amount of resistances, so penetration is your friend. and with this build, we're stacking crit more than we are weapon damage. But bow has a percentage multiplier that makes it so you don't fight as much, and I will go into that in a second. If you are attracted to this build because you're a newer player and you don't want to get into the fray of things, I'm going to tell you this right now. If you cannot light attack weave, playing it as a bow and or a Nightblade build, we're going to have a hard time, because that is the weaving class. Nightblade is the weaving class. And bow especially is a weapon that does well if you can light attack weaving. But I just want to kind of put that out there. If you can't light attack weave, this may not be the build for you. This may not be the class for you. You may want to try a different class. However, you can make this work if you're bad at weaving. As long as you use a light attack every now and then, and when I say every now and then, I mean like maybe every other ability, or maybe let's say you do slow weaving. So a good weave is like barely see the light attack go off. But if you do that'll still be better than not weaving. If you think you can do that, then by all means keep watching, and I will, hell, if you're on PC NA, get with me in-game and I'll even help you figure things out. But if you can't weave, you're probably gonna have a hard time with this. Continuing on, if you can weave, you're gonna have Merciless as your bread and butter burst ability. It also gives you free damage, what's not like. And in addition to that, have the Hawkeye passive in bow. This is what is very, very important. Using snipe, it is even more important. Oftentimes I'll go into battlegrounds and I'll see some Nightblade spamming snipe, but they're not doing light attacks. And so their snipe is really just a little tickle. The only thing that actually affects me is the defile, which is annoying, but damage-wise, I can just shrug it off. If you're ever wondering why you're not able to kill people, it's probably because you're either they're abusing in-game mechanics, and when I say abusing, I mean like it's there. They're not exploiting, they're not cheating, they're just really good at it. And they've built their character to be that way. And it's annoying, but that's part of the game. You can do it too, and you can figure out how. It's a whole process. But another reason that they might not be actually taking that much damage is because you're missing out on certain modifiers that your class or playstyle would otherwise have. ESO is a game full of passives and a bunch of different modifiers, and it's important to know some of them, if not all of them. Now, let's go over the passives and why the passives here are very important. Find us training. This used to be a kind of a useless passive. Unless you were like 28 meters away, unless you were far away from your target, you were not getting the maximum damage out of your bow build. So that was kind of a dead passive for me most of the time, because I was usually around 15 meters. And this build caters to that perfectly. I get increased crit chance, so that's double crit chance if I'm far away. If I'm closer, I have just the crit chance, but I get 5% extra damage when I'm within 15 meters. That is beautiful. 5% damage of all kinds, not just target, AoE, dot, direct, all types. That's great, especially because I sometimes go in closer to get the kill, because travel time, dodging, etc., etc. Moving on, hasty retreat. This is our kind of our mobility ability. Because we're doing a medium armor-ish stand blade, you're going to be dodge rolling a fair bit. Try not to dodge roll too much, because then you'll run out of stamina, but that's going to give us some extra speed. And because I'm using a swift jewelry piece, in addition to swift jewelry, I'm also a Bosmer, which gives me 5% extra movement speed. That's 12% extra movement speed, plus the major expedition you get from dodging. And that's, I can cover a lot of ground very quickly. In addition to that, I use shade. This is my mobility skill, aside from the expedition. I can put shade down, dodge, run away, and then I can use shade to go back. If you struggle with shade, I highly suggest the add-on that you see here. It essentially, use minion if you use an add-on tracker, and just look up dark shade tracker or whatever, and this will give you a live how long you have left in your shade and which direction it is. Sometimes I will move out of range of my shade. I'll be like, oh god, no, my shade, which with this, it tells you which direction it is so that you can move and decisively go back to it. It also tells you the time, so if you don't want to look down at your ability bar, it's just, it's nice, okay? What do you want me to tell you? It's nice. I covered passives. Oh, no, wait, I didn't cover Hawkeye. So let's talk about the Hawkeye passive real quick. This is what makes bow do damage. Every 5 or every 5 seconds. Every light attack, get a stack of Hawkeye, which lasts for 5 seconds. This stack of Hawkeye will increase your damage with the bow abilities by 5%, stacking up to 5 times. That means you can get 25% extra damage. 25% extra damage on snipe of all things, but you can also get it on your poison injection, which is pretty handy, and of course toxic barrage. So having that active when you're fighting, even though I'm using crushing weapon, I'm still getting a lot of extra damage because it affects your light attacks, it affects acid spray if you happen to use that, it affects your ultimate, it affects the impact of magnum shot. Though magnum shot isn't that much damage, it does add up over time. So having Hawkeye up as much as you can is very important if you're going to do a bow build. It's doubly important if you're using snipe. I tried to use snipe. The reason I did not use snipe is because I can't really fit a source of major breach on my bar in a comfortable manner, so I have not done so. That is why I'm using crushing weapon. But another reason I don't use snipe is because people use crushing shock, which will interrupt snipe. There's also tower fights and LOS. Using snipe in a tower fight is really fucking hard, okay? I tried it and it sucked. So I decided to use crushing weapon, which is instant and just, you can do a light attack. Again, that's another reason this build is very light attack weaving focused, is because you have crushing weapon, relentless focus, and Hawkeye. Those are 3 abilities that heavily rely on light attack weaving. So that's the passives. Of course, as for your class passes, just grab all of them. Sometimes they won't apply, just grab all of them. Grab any passive that applies to combat, which is basically all your armor passives, all of everything in your class, armor, and weapon. By weapon, I mean, if you do the Ice Staff route, which I will talk about later, I only put it in Ancient Knowledge because I don't have enough magicka to actually make Ice Staff really that potent. Some people will use it because, hey, I can block using my off resource. I don't want to block using my off resource because I don't have enough magicka. If I lose all my magicka from blocking, I don't have magicka to heal. So I do not have Trifocus, but that's something that you want to consider. You could also do Flame Staff on your back bar and take Trifocus and do a heavy attack to get that sweet, sweet extra damage over time. That'll add to your overall pressure. And of course, if I'm using Ice Staff on my back bar or Destro Staff on my back bar, I'm going to be using Sus. That's my source of breach, but I will talk about the issues with that build in a bit. Relentless Focus. You want to light attack weave with it, and instead of maybe having it go off every time you get it, hold on to it for a second, because this will give you some passive weapon and spell damage. So this will allow you to get your opponent's health bar down lower. You don't want to fire this off when they're at max, and you can, and there are situations where that is useful. But typically, I kind of want to wait until they're, maybe like 75%, something else, and then I want to hit Magnum and Relentless. I don't remember which one I hit first. I've done both, and they're both fairly effective. But because both of these have a travel time, these together will hit at roughly the same time, which makes it very hard for your opponent to CC break in time to avoid Merciless or Relentless. I should probably talk about Relentless versus Merciless. So there are 2 versions of this. This one is stamina. It does disease damage. It does not heal as much if you're in melee range, but we're not in melee range. That doesn't matter as much. It also does less damage than the Magicka Morph. However, it does grant you extra weapon and spell damage. So that's kind of fucking nice. The main reason I actually went with this morph, though, is because I am running out of magic a lot, because I'm not using Tripods, probably. But that is a choice that you should make for yourself. Which morph do you want to use? Both of them will work well. Both of them have their strengths and weaknesses. This is probably one of the better choices in the game when it comes to picking. Sus, it's almost not a competition. Sus is better as long as you're not doing a support build. Sus is probably the way you want to go. For a lot of abilities, it's one or the other. But for this, you can have a choice on what you like that works best for you. For the other build, though, where I use Snipe, I have to use Relentless Focus, and I'll do it again. Crushing Weapon. This is my source of breach, as well as my spammable. It's what I'm going to be hammering most of the time. Jade. Probably the most important skill on my bar, aside from, maybe my burst heal, because that stops me from dying. But the reason this is so important is because this is what will really unlock Nightblade's potential for you, especially ranged Nightblade. So let's say I put my shade down and then I start engaging in combat over here. You know, it's not that far from my shade, but it's far enough. Someone comes up to me. Oh god, they're beating on my face. I can use shade and run away. In addition, you can also dodge roll right after shade, which will help any projectiles that were launched at you before you shaded miss, and then you'll get extra movement speed, which can then let you run fast because you're a Bossmer, probably in medium armor. You don't have to be a Bossmer, but in this case I am a Bossmer, and you have 1 swift joy, so yay, really, really fucking fast. Who doesn't love being speedy? Being speedy is fun. Acid Spray, you can use the Bombard version. I kind of like Bombard is definitely useful, but I don't like using it because every time I use it, it forces my enemy to dodge. Now that does make their behavior a little bit more predictable. However, I prefer to just do damage to them, and so forcing my enemy to dodge is kind of a pain in the ass. Now, the reason I use Acid Spray is because I want to be able to pull people out of cloak, but I also want to be able to kill them when they're dodge rolling. I used to use Camo Hunter on my front bar for that extra damage, but and though I had a way to pull Nightblades out of cloak, I could not kill people when, like you can with a lot of other classes that have AoE abilities. So I was getting fucked up by other Stamina Nightblades. Then I put this on, and now I actually stand a chance. It's not perfect, doesn't do that much damage. The damage over time is nice, but it's overall pretty negligible. It's really just something that I use to finish people off, pull people out of cloak, or if there's a giant group in front of me, I'll maybe hit them with this and then run, just so I contribute to the fight. I get the AP off of their death if they end up dying. Magnum Shot, this is our stun. That's basically it. This is our stun. Make sure you combo your stun with either Relentless and Toxic Barrage. Keep in mind, if you light attack, your light attack will hit at roughly the same time as Magnum Shot. So what I would do is make sure you have Crushing, then hit Magnum and light attack, or Crushing, light attack, and then Magnum. That way they hit at roughly the same time, and then again you can then also hit Merciless if you have it up, which will make it really hard to avoid. If you're using Snipe, you can add that in before or after, whatever. Again, more burst damage, hard to avoid. Another thing, Toxic Barrage and Magnum. What you want to do is you want to go Magnum, Toxic Barrage. Toxic Barrage is a channeled, although they can actually dodge it despite it being attack. However, this thing lasts for 4 seconds. So, and dodging only lasts for like 1 second. So they're going to have to burn a lot of stamina, dodge all of this damage, which means unless they're able to light and sight it, they're probably going to be taking some of the damage. You're not using this for its direct damage that it applies while you're using it. You're using it for the dot, especially. That dot in combination with the dot from Poison Injection, plus Poison Injection has the execute damage, and you know, any status effects, like I have Burning Weapon on, any of that shit, that will help contribute to add pressure and make them dead. I'm pretty sure that Hawkeye also applies to the damage over time on Toxic Barrage as well, so, you know, extra damage. Boundary Disguise. Oh boy. Controversial. Everyone hates this ability, and I understand why. For Magicka Nightblade, I have a very strict way in which I use Cloak, but for Stamblade, because of how Stamblade is, it doesn't have the Magicka reserves to heal itself, so you can't stand in the fray. You need to dodge, and you need to use Cloak. Which means a lot of the time, people are gonna have their attacks missing, and that's really frustrating to fight against. So I understand it when people hate fighting Stamblades. I hate fighting Stamblades because they just, unless they're crutching on Cloak, like a good Stamblade is just really fucking hard to kill because they dodge everything and then they cloak and then all that stuff. But if someone is crutching on Cloak, it is a good way to die. So don't look at this build and be like, oh, it has Cloak, I can do it. No. Crutching on Cloak means you will die. Make sure you use other abilities, like Shade. This is what's going to keep you alive. Don't use Cloak and just expect that to get you away. What I would suggest doing is use Shade, run the opposite direction, use Shade again, and then Cloak. That way they're over there, so by the time they make it to where you were, you're cloaked in a way. I'm very, very particular about Cloak. In general, though, you're probably going to end up using Cloak more than I would on Magicka Nightblade in a fight, just because you're going to need to relieve pressure because you don't have the healing power that a Magicka have. Going on, we got Poison Injection. If you wanted to use Tripods, because this now has Minor Savagery on both bars, Major Savagery, you could use the Brutality morph of Poison Injection, the other morph. That way you'd have your damage stats, or buffs, and then you try pots, which would give you more or magic regen. However, I really like the execute damage from Poison Injection. It does make a difference. So it's a really hard choice. Because I have not made that change, I am still using PvP weapon power potions. That's a good time to mention consumables. I'm using Jewels of Misrule, pretty standard, and the Shadow as a... But as for potions, I am primarily using Essence of Weapon Power with crit. I haven't changed that. You could do Heroism if you're like... I just do Weapon Power, Stam Regen, whatever. Bigger, to heal, it's really nice, and it gives you a minor resolve. What's not to like? Healthy Offering. This is your burst heal. Try not to spam it. What you probably want to do is you want to use it once or twice and then start doing damage again, because if you're not doing damage to your opponent, then you're going to run out of magic and they're going to keep beating on you. If you do damage, it's called applying counter pressure. If you do damage to your opponent, they might take a second and heal themselves, which takes pressure off you. So there's give and take to it. Try not to just spam this, because then you'll run out of magic and you'll die. Furthermore, I have Leeching Strikes, not just as a sustain skill, but also because this build doesn't have that much healing. Being able to have just a little bit of extra healing on light attacks is nice. It makes it so I don't completely melt when someone puts a dot on me. As for the back bar, I'm going to say dealer's choice. I use in-cap because if someone gets too close, I can use in-cap and stun them. It's nice. However, the main reason I use in-cap aside from that is Reeve. You store 100 magicka and stamina every time you do a light or heavy attack. That's really nice, especially on my back bar where I struggle with stamina or with magicka sustain, because this is where most of my magicka abilities are. I'm using light attacks on my back bar because Hawkeye, so I need my Hawkeye passive up. So it all just synergizes very well. But probably the smarter thing to do would be to use the non-damaging version of Soul Shred. I don't remember what it's called. It's not Soul Burst. The opposite of Soul Tether. So I would use that. Actually, I think I can just... Soul Siphon. I would use Soul Siphon if I were you. I've also, when I played with a friend and we would all stack Dawnbreaker in one spot, I used Dawnbreaker. It's unmorphed. It was probably kind of funny for the other guy to see him get killed by unmorphed Dawnbreaker, but you want Dawnbreaker smiting, that way you have the stun and you can all stun people together with your friends. If you have friends. I don't have friends. At least I don't have that many friends. Basically, this one is dealer's choice. You can make your choice there. There are benefits to each. Having in-cap on your back bar will increase your crit passively by a small amount. It's not much, but hey, it increases your chance to crit heal. Also, having siphoning abilities on your back bar will also increase your heal. I don't have that, I have 6%. So that 3% extra healing does kind of add up. And then in addition, also having Dawnbreakers on your back bar, because of Slayer, you'll get extra weapon and spell damage, which can increase your healing. It does not increase your healing as much as 3% extra just healing from the siphoning passive, but it does something. You could also do Meteor if you wanted a ranged ability, but I don't like Meteor that much. Unless you're on a Templar or if you're using Fear, I don't like Meteor that much. It's really easy to avoid. Now, I think I've gone over everything. Let's kind of look here. If you have any questions, you're free to ask them in the comments below, because I'm not a very big YouTuber or streamer. Really, I can take the time to interact with all of you and answer all of your questions. So I stress this, do not be afraid to ask questions, because chances are I will answer them. This is the CP. I'm not going to go over all the CP. You can look at it for yourself. Just pause the video. Okay, now that you've unpaused the video, kind of moving on. If you paused it, you took a look at all the traits here and the enchantments. I kind of mix and match my enchantments. I only do tri-stats on the big pieces, and then I do kind of a mix of other enchantments. Make sure you have at least 2 well-fitted. I have a reinforced chest piece, personally. That's a choice thing. But make sure you have at least 2 well-fitted, and then the others can be a mix of Divines, infused, well-fitted. Only do infused on the head, chest, or legs. Oh, right, jewelry. That's what I wanted to check on. So for jewelry, I have 1 non-infused Stam Regen jewelry. This is Mark and Ring of Majesty, free stats. this is the cheap way of getting a 7% extra movement speed instead of the purple version. So I only have that amount of stamina recovery rather than like an infused stamina recovery build because I'm playing a boss mare, which means I get extra stamina recovery. So that is enough to get me by. That plus my leeching strikes. So that's enough. I do have a infused magicka recovery. I could do tri-stat. I considered doing tri-stat for this one. If you do tripods, you could try tri-stat, or you could just turn this to a. If your sustain is fine, then you can just turn this into a infused weapon damage. And then here I also have infused weapon damage. You'll see that I chose the spell damage glyph for that little extra magicka recovery because, as I said, I struggle with magicka recovery. As for the weights of my armor, I do 3, 2, 2. I do 2 light, 2 heavy, and 3 medium. You can mix and match this as you want because this is Order's Wrath. It's a craftable. You can change which pieces go where and all that, but I'm pretty content with this weight. So yeah, I think that covers everything. Yeah. If you have any questions, again, put it in the comments. I will get back to you. And I hope you have a day.